Okay. Megan, can you hear me and see my screen properly? Just checking before we start.
Yes, everything looks good.
Okay, fantastic, great. Okay, well, we're going to get started. Thank you, everybody, for attending our webinar. Start the recording. I think it is being recorded now. I see that it is being recorded. We have a very short webinar and quick agenda here. I'm going to do a very quick couple of slides overview of Frable and what we do, because there are some people attending the webinar who are relatively new to Frable. And then we'll jump into workflow designs, some of the common types of workflows that we see customers using, and questions that have come up in support for how do I do this, and in sales situations and customer situations, how do I solve this particular business problem in Frable. So real quick, just 2 or 3 slides. What do we do? Well, we are a forms and workflow automation software, which is very simple, very easy to use, very visual. And our customers range from small companies to school districts to large universities and very large organizations all over the world, using it for everyday routine business processes, things that they do on a daily basis within their business office or within their organizations, things like purchase orders, new hire onboarding, timesheets, expense reports, leave approvals, routine stuff that you might be doing today using an Excel sheet and emailing it around. And in some cases, honestly, find people doing it literally on paper. And of course, the advantage, the thing that they like about it is that you can do this in Frable for the most part without using expensive IT resources by and large. The only time when you need to work with IT is typically things like, security manager, setup, database, connecting to databases or backend systems and things of that sort. But by and large, designing the form, designing the workflow, designing business logic, creating PDF documents, so on and so forth is 100% visual and very easy to do. As I mentioned, we have customers all over the world. Here's just a small sampling of them. There are a lot of customers spread out over a variety of business areas, verticals, if you will, from school districts and universities, as I mentioned, to really companies in a wide variety of vertical areas. And they're using it, as I mentioned, for a wide variety, again, of business solutions. Okay, so that's just a real quick introduction to Frable for those who aren't familiar with it. You can go to our website, frevvo.com, and you find a lot of information both on our product, solutions, pricing, our customers, a lot of case studies on here. Under resources and templates, you can find a number of examples of purchase order, invoice approval, travel requests, et cetera, that you can just try online. Okay, so now that being said, this webinar is about workflow designs and what kind of business workflows can you create with Frable. So, business workflows, they really do come in all shapes and sizes. And I think I'll start out by almost unusually by talking about parallel workflows. It's something that we actually don't yet do very well in Frable. So you can't really create a parallel workflow that does fork join in Frable. And I know that that's an issue or something that we want to deliver an offer to our customers. And our engineers are hard at work working on that feature, including as well as several others. I don't really know exactly what the priority and when exactly that'll be released. But in the interim, while they're working on adding those kinds of capabilities to Frable, what we've seen when working with customers through our client services and our sales efforts with customers is that you really can solve a very wide variety of real business problems in Frable using functionality that exists today. So obviously there's the workflow on the left, which is a new hire onboarding workflow. That's about as simple as it gets. It's not even necessarily a workflow in the sense that it doesn't really route to multiple people. We refer to this in our documentation and internally as a screen flow. And it's really just a a series of forms that are presented to the user. The goal of this situation is to collect each unique piece of information just once, and then eventually from that, and at the same time to present each present in the presentation aspect of it on each page of that flow. Present only ask for a limited amount of information. So you never want to, put up something on the screen where the user is overwhelmed with 200, 300 fields on a form. Always break it up into multiple pages, something you can very easily do with Frable. There are workflows like the one you see on the right. It looks a little more complicated than it really is. It's basically this conditional routing. Super common. If the manager or if an amount exceeds 10,000, you need VP approval. Otherwise, skip it and go straight to finance review. And also, of course, the VP or manager may approve it. If they approve it, good. Move on to the next step. If they don't approve it, you want to go back. You want the ability, at least, for them to reject it and go back to the original requester and make corrections, provide more details or clarifications or whatever the case may be. There's also situations we definitely have where an IT trouble ticket type of workflow, and I'm going to create some of these very quickly on the screen. We won't have time to go into every detail of how to create any of these workflows, but I wanted to give you a quick idea when we create some of these. The workflow on the left here is a trouble ticket type of system where I'm going to create a new issue. Then it's going to go to the support staff inbox, if you will, and that might have multiple people. I might have 5 support staff who work on troubleshooting issues or tickets. And if the issue, they might basically say, oh, okay, I took XYZ action, but the issue isn't resolved again, and they put this thing loops around in this support staff inbox until the issue is resolved. And then you can go off and maybe in this case create an FAQ page or do something, do whatever the appropriate action is. You might also, this looks like a parallel workflow for sure, but it isn't really a parallel workflow in the true sense. There's no fork join going on over here. But a common example is where I've got a proposal, for example, and I need to get comments or reviews from multiple users, specific people, in this case, reviewer 1, 2, and 3. And you can basically also create workflows that send it from, submit the proposal, go to reviewer 1, reviewer 2. This picture actually is not 100% accurate. It really goes to reviewer 1, who sends it to reviewer 2, reviewer 3, and then the workflow completes. I apologize for that. So let's take a look at some examples here. So the first few are so simple that I'm going to just very quickly fly through that. So the first one is just a new hire onboarding screen flow, and all it is I've got a bunch of steps here: employee information, personal allowances, I-9, and confirmation. Each step, if you go to the assignment tab here, you'll see there's no assignment at all. So the step is not assigned to a user or a role or to an email address. So backing up a little bit, from a workflow assignment perspective in Frable, you can assign workflows to specific users. You can assign them to a role, which is a collection of users or a group of users. And these are authenticated users, or in the role scenario, you must be authenticated and have the appropriate role. Or you can assign to an email address where there's no login required, and this is just an anonymous set of email address. So you just send a contract or a client services statement of work or anything outside the organization where you don't need an access. The order, there's a priority to that order. So if there's a user, the user will be given highest priority, followed by role, followed by email address. So you can have all 3 of those. And in the case of dynamic, setting those dynamically, sometimes a user might resolve to empty, so then it'll fall back to the role and so on and so forth. So back to this workflow, in this case, we have no assignments at all. And each step has a form. So I can go to the employee information page here, and I've got a form which asks for whatever, first name, last name, etc. information. On the next page, I have personal allowances, the personal allowances form, which asks for a different set of information. If I were to run this example in here, give me a second over here. When the form loads over there, you'll see that I will see page 1. Oh, come on. Page 1, which is employee information. You can see a navigation toolbar appearing on top, showing you that you've got step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4 in the form. So I can type whatever I want in here. Whatever. I guess I should have created a form which had a bunch of stuff filled in. And I can type sign the form here on the screen. But when I go to the next step, when I click personal allowances here, the next form immediately displays. Now you can see the advantage of using a screen flow obviously is a limited amount of information on each screen. But at the same time, I'm sure everybody, most people on the call are familiar with federal W-4 or some sort of tax form. Tax forms will typically ask for your first name, last name, social security number, mailing address, and so on and so forth. We're not going to ask that same information multiple times. We're not even going to ask the employee to sign multiple times. You can see that the signature and the date are automatically transferred over from the first form. You can certainly have, forms. The next form, you can see you have dynamic behavior in a form, very common in Frable as well. If you select this thing, a section shows up saying, well, you must fill out this form, otherwise it's hidden. And then if you click review and confirm, you can view the completed I-9 or federal W-4. You can see that the entire form's been filled out with the first name, last name, signature, and so on and so forth. A valid I-9 that you can submit to the IRS or whichever the appropriate authorities. So that's really simple. That's just a screen flow. All that does is it's basically, there's no routing here at all, okay? All we're doing here is creating essentially a multi-page form. And the next couple of examples are also pretty simple. Zoom through them as well. There's user-based and role-based routing. Guessing quite a few people on the call are pretty familiar with this, but we'll quickly go through it as well. In this case, we're going from an employee to a manager and to the finances is the actual workflow in here. But in the manager step, we're now going to route this to a specific user. So I can route this to an actual person. I can just type in. I have apologize. I have odd names for these users, so I remember them. So I've got a user. I can just type in a user in here, Jerry. And now all I've done over here is said, okay, this workflow, once the employee step completes, it's going to always route to the user named Jerry in this case. Pretty straightforward. If I were to run this workflow, not sure why this is taking so long in my browser, but when I run this workflow over here, I might order some red widgets that costs 10 of them for $10 each, and sign it. This is my first step. The next step here was routed to a user named Jerry. When I click, it's going to basically send it specifically to Jerry for approval. Now, if I remember right, I'm logged in as Jerry in this browser. And if I didn't mess that up, I should basically see a task in my task list here saying that a PO was submitted by Tom for $100. I can click on it, click on manager approval, and send it on to the finance department. Since we haven't set up a finance role, since the finance department role was not set, it's behaving like a screen flow, similar to the first example that we saw, and I can just complete this workflow in here. Okay, so again, very simple, simply route to a user. The third example here is role-based routing. It's the same workflow again. Now in this case, I'm going to route to the manager as before. But in the role, in the finance step here, we're going to route it to a role. Okay, thank God. So I picked the role frevvo_finance, and the appropriate person in that particular role all people in that role, I should say, sorry, there may be multiple users in that role, and all those users will get a notification. So in this case, we're now routing to a user. In the second case, we're routing to a role. So real simple again, not going to run this workflow. It's pretty obvious, I think, what happens in this case. The next example is more interesting here. Let me sort by name 4. So you've got dynamic users and roles. And so this is a common scenario again, that a lot of people get confused about. Well, I want to route this workflow to a manager, but I don't want to route it to Jerry. I wanted to route it to the appropriate person, the manager, my manager. So there are a couple of ways to do this. The specific case of routing to a manager, you can actually, Frable has a built-in template here. I think it's called subject, if I remember right, reports to. If you can use this template in here, and this will automatically resolve to the manager, to whoever this person reports to. Now, obviously, depending on your security manager, that information must be available to Frable. Otherwise, it's going to resolve to empty. If you use, for example, the Frable built-in default security manager, you can set who person A reports to, and then the system knows that. You can obviously also get that from Active Directory or other systems as well. The other way to do this assignment, the more general way here, is to really use controls in the form as templates, and that makes it a little more interesting. Let me just go back there for 1 second. Excuse me. Okay. So you can also use controls in the form. So in this case, I'm going to go up to the form in here, and you can see here that I've got a control here called Manager ID. This control, and I've got a control here called Finance Role. So let's say in my particular workflow, I always route to my manager, but the finance approval depends upon, let's say, the grand total, the amount in the PO and in whatever is being requested. So we're going to set up this finance role dynamically. Now, to do that, we're going to use a business rule. So let's go to the rules over here, and you can see that I've got a rule here called set the finance role. It's a very simple rule. If the grand total is more than $10,000, it's going to set the finance role, the control in the form to this string, frevvo CFO, this particular role. Otherwise, it's going to set it to the standard finance person. Okay, so it's going to change roles depending on depending on what the grand total is in the form here. And then we're going to use this control, the value of this control, to dynamically route the finance step. So I'm going to click on the finance step. I'm going to go to assignment, and well, I already have it done. I guess I was testing it. Typically use a control like this. You can see under control templates, it's showing me that finance role. I'm going to click on that, and now the routing of this step is dynamic. So whatever the value of finance role resolves to, it'll be either frevvo CFO or frevvo finance, depending on the amount depending on the grand total, and that's where this workflow will route. Similarly, the manager step, you can certainly use this in this case, but you notice that we had a control there called manager ID. It's really doing the same thing in here. You can route to a specific user using the manager ID control. Now, again, this is going to resolve dynamically. You go back to this rules tab here. You can see that there's a rule that sets the manager ID to my manager. Now, this is exactly the same information as that reports to template. So I guess there are 2 ways to do the same thing in this particular case. So if we were to run this this particular workflow, the next step is going to route to my manager, and then it'll route to the appropriate finance role. So instead of routing it, here you can see here that I didn't hide. Normally in a normal workflow, this manager ID and finance role controls would be hidden. But just so you can see what's going on here, you can see that my manager is set to Jerry, and the finance role defaults to Frable Finance because the grand total is less than 10,000. But if I were to order, 200 widgets costing $200 each, you can see that the business rule ran behind the scene, and the finance role changed to frevvo_CFO to the CFO, so it can route dynamically depending on conditions that are in the form. So if I were to do this over here and click send to manager, it's now gone to my manager. I think that was Jerry. Okay, yeah. So the manager was Jerry. You can see in the audit trail that Tom submitted it and it's locked for user Jerry. When I click play, the manager approves. And in this case, when I click this next button, since the amount was under $10,000, it's going to route to the role frevvo_finance. And it's going to go to the finance department rather than to the CFO. And now anybody in that particular role can pick up that workflow and continue. So you can very easily create workflows that that route completely dynamically. Both the user and the role can be made dynamic. Now, what about a situation where you want to route to multiple users within a role, right? So I think this was the example where we had this situation over here where I'm going to basically create a new issue, then I'm going to send it to the support staff. You can see over here that the assignment is to a role called frevvo IT, and anybody in that IT role can pick up this workflow. But like with support issues and trouble tickets, you might not be able to resolve the trouble ticket or the issue immediately. So I might need to send it right back into that IT role. So whenever something happens, the next person can pick it up. So how do you do that? Well, the first thing you do is you assign it to a role. So in this case, it's assigned to the frevvo IT role. And then the other thing you do is in the settings tab here, we're gonna turn on this save to role feature over here. And then the last thing is in the overall workflow settings tab also, we want to turn on this save load feature. So a save button is automatically displayed for every step in the workflow. So what this does is, I'm going to start a new issue. It's going to go to the support staff. And once it goes to the support staff, I can basically, we'll run it and try it out. What I can do is I can click that save button as the first support. I can add a comment, for example, say whatever, I took XYZ action, but the issue is not yet resolved. So I'm going to click the save button and send it to, keep it in the IT department support staff inbox, basically. So let's say it's, I don't know, something like that. My laptop screen is not working. I'm going to click continue. It's in the support staff inbox. I think this user, Jerry, is in support staff. So now you can see that it's pending for role frevvo IT. So I'm logged in here as Jerry, and in the third browser here, I'm logged in as Spike, who is also in support staff. So both users are seeing this workflow simultaneously, and any one of them can pick it up. So let's say Jerry picks it up and says, well, what's the problem Tom's having here? Well, the laptop screen's on the fritz, not working. So Jerry might say, examine screen, need to order a part or something like that, right? Put a comment in here, well, the issue is not fully resolved. So the other thing I've done in this particular form here is created a required control here. So you can't accidentally click this button, create the create FAQ page button. If you click on that FAQ page button, it's going to say, well, has the issue been fully resolved? If it's not, you got to click the save button. Now, because we've turned on save to role in here, when I click the save button, it's going to go right back into the inbox for that role rather than being saved to my own inbox over here. Normally, the save button without any of these settings click, the save button just allows me to save a partially completed form or workflow to my own task list so I can come back to it and continue it later. And we'll see an example of that, a dynamic example of that later. So now if you see over here, so Jerry saved it, it's again been saved to the role IT. Now let's say the part comes in and, but it's not Jerry, it's somebody else in IT, Spike, for example, who actually handles it. I can click the play button over here. The part was ordered, so I can click plus here. something like that in here. And now in this case, I could certainly click save once again, and it'll go right back into that Frable IT role. You can do this as many times as necessary until the issue is resolved. So in this, essentially, we're looping between multiple users in the same role, that support staff inbox, over and over again. Now that the issue is fully resolved, I can click this box or check this box saying, okay, the issue is now fully resolved. And I can click on create FAQ page. Now, a couple of notes, some of the things I haven't done here is you can customize the whatever text shows up in the blue button, you can customize the text that shows up in the save button as well. So be even more meaningful. So for example, you could even have a business rule that says, when this box is checked, you could basically change this button so that it's more obvious and more meaningful to the end user. When the box is not checked, you could literally put, I don't know, do not click in here if you wanted. But now that the box is checked, the issue is fully resolved. We're going to click on create FAQ page, and there'll be some URL. In this case, it's not applicable because, well, it was a laptop screen. Click finish, and the issue that was submitted has been resolved. Should be gone from this task list as well. Okay, so excuse me. The save to role capability allows you to assign a role and loop dynamically between users in that specific role. But what if you want to loop between an arbitrary set of users? I just totally ad hoc routing, right? So I want to basically say I get the workflow to user A, and then I want to basically say, but I'm going to send it off to a different person. Whoa, I'm just going to put out the trash. You need to send the workflow to a specific person. So I've got a proposal in here, and then there's a step here called review. Got the form in here, which has got some proposal information, and then a table, a repeating table with reviews in here, and a pick list over here that says, okay, which users do you want to send this? Now, in this case, for simplicity, I created this as a drop down, a pick list. You can do, for example, you could use a combo box in here, and the combo box can be connected to the list of users in Frable, so you can route to users that way if you prefer as well. Again, I also put a checkbox in here to check only when the reviews are complete. How are we setting this assignment here? Well, the assignment is set to we're using that template. So sorry, I need to back up here. In the forms over here, I remember I had this pick list here. It's called the control is called send for review to. And so in the workflow here, what we're saying is we're going to route that particular step to whatever the value of this pick list is. So I'm going to go in here, and here's my pick list sent for review to. So it's a template once again, and whatever the value of that particular pick list is, that's where this will be routed. And then the other thing is we've checked this box called save to user in here. So in this case, the save button behaves differently. It's going to save it again rather than saving it to my own task list, which we can also do. The workflow can be set up to route to a specific user dynamically. So we'll give this one a shot over here. And so I got my first name, last name, I put something in here. So let's send it for review to Jerry. And now when I click continue, because this control is set to Jerry, it's going to route to that specific user. So if you log in, if you look at Jerry's inbox here, you're going to see that the workflow exists in his inbox, but it's not in Spike's or any other user's inbox for that matter. So now I'm going to look at this thing and say, oh, Tom made a proposal. I'm going to put in my name here. Obviously, you could use a business rule to do that as well. I don't know, it's a bit thin on details like that. And then when I click this, again, because I have this checkbox here, I can't accidentally click finish. I can certainly click reject. It's something that I haven't talked about as yet. You could click reject here and send this all the way back to the original requester, Tom. I could put something like this. and send, and let's try that. I'll send it back. And so now Jerry has rejected this back to Tom. So now I'm going to go back to Tom's. Tom also has a task list, obviously. And you can see that, right. So this is the one that Jerry said, I need more detail. There'll be emails being sent, email notifications that are sent in the background here, by the way. So I'm going to click here. Well, there isn't a whole lot of information I can provide. So let's assume there was a checkbox here or some text area where I could have provided some more details. I'm going to send this right back to Jerry for further review. So Jerry says, I don't know, I need info from Spike, let's say. And then I'm going to basically choose a specific user here. So I, as Jerry, I'm making the decision that I need more info, but I need it from this specific person. Now, when I click save here, this proposal, the workflow has gone away from my task list and it's now in Spike's task list. And this can go on as many times as you want. So you can send it from person 1 to person 2 to person 3 to 4, 5, 6, however many users you want. Ad hoc, on an ad hoc basis. I can send it to essentially any user that I want in the system. So I might say, whatever, something, I don't know, whatever. And check when all the reviews here are complete. And now I'm going to click finish and the workflow has been completed and it's gone from everybody's task list. So those were two sort of ways to loop. One was looping between multiple users in the same role. The other one was completely ad hoc. I'm just deciding on the fly where the heck I want to send this, how I want to route this workflow. You can take this one step further and loop completely dynamically between users and roles. So I can do all of this together. So what I could do over here is the same form and workflow again. You can see here that it's got the same form and workflow, but I've got a few other controls in here. So I've got something called assign to user, which basically lets me select a specific user. I've got a control called user ID, and I've got a control called role, which I'm just going to assign, which I'm going to default to frevvo IT. So in this particular case, I'm going to give myself 3 choices. When I pick up this workflow, I can basically say, I need to do a little more research. I'm going to keep it in my own inbox. Or I need more information, but I need it from, I know it's this particular person who has knowledge about this particular issue. I'm going to send it to that specific person. Or it's a generic thing, such as, I don't know, we ordered a part, we're waiting for it to arrive. I'm just going to return it to the IT role. So the workflow behaves differently, or the save of the workflow behaves differently in a relatively ad hoc manner, depending on what the person who's using the workflow does. How do you do this? Well, again, remember that these task assignments have a priority. So what we've done here is created a template again. This is again a control template because of the curly braces. So it's going to route to the value of user ID. If you go back to the form, we'll remember that we have a control called user ID and a control called role. So this thing is going to route to whoever is in that user ID, if it finds something in that control. If you leave that control empty, then it's going to fall back to the next thing here, role. It says, oh, there's no user, so what's next? Role, is there anything in that control? And if it is, frevvo IT, for example, then the workflow will be returned to the IT inbox. And finally, if both of those are empty, both the user ID and role are empty, that means I want to keep it. The workflow doesn't know what to do. So it's going to save the workflow to my own task list. So it behaves essentially like a save. I have saved this for future use. So let's see if I did it correctly. So whatever, something. I'm going to click continue here. Now, in this case, by default, since I had the role set to IT support, it's in the IT support inbox, Jerry and Tom. Now, I'm going to basically pick this up and I say, need to think about this, right? So then I'm going to click keep issue. You can see that I've got a business rule running behind the scenes, which I can show you real quick over here. There are some rules running behind here, which says if I chose to keep the issue, I'm going to set the user ID to my own user and clear out the other controls. If I basically select, I'm going to assign it to a different user, I'm going to pick the user from this box and update the value of this control with that information. If I pick return to role, I'm going to set the role to frevvo IT. In this case, because I want to keep the issue, the user ID is set to my own user. When I click save, it's simply going to save to my own inbox. So we can go look at that audit trail, and it says, well, Tom sent it to Jerry, and Jerry just saved it because he needs to do some more thinking or some research about it. A couple hours later, I'm like, okay, I thought about this here, but I need info from Spike, let's say. So I'm going to assign this to a specific person. I'm going to pick the user Spike. You can see that Spike's user ID is automatically copied in here. I'm going to click save, and now it's gone from my inbox and it has appeared in Spike's inbox in here. Again, you can look at the task list. I'm sorry, the audit trail here. It went from Tom to Jerry, who saved it and then sent it on to Spike, who looks at it and says, well, need a new one ordered or something like that. And then says, well, I don't need to keep it. I'm just going to return it to the IT role because anybody in the IT department can handle this issue. And now you'll see that the workflow has gone back into that IT role. So you can route very, very dynamically. You can create these workflows that route in a much more controlled manner, that conditionally do things depending upon whether or not certain conditions are true, that route to different people depending on a condition in the workflow, that can route between multiple users, between multiple users in a role, between arbitrary sets of users in a totally ad hoc manner. You can also save the workflow and take multiple actions on that workflow yourself. You can do all of this totally dynamically. Now, obviously, I've shown you relatively simplified examples. In the real world, this kind of ad hoc routing and these workflows can get extremely complex. If you've got questions or examples of those, send us an email or contact our support team, and we'll be more than happy to help you help answer those questions. The last thing that I have in here is an anonymous user. So I skipped the part where we simply route to an anonymous user by email. So that's pretty straightforward here. All you could do in here is I'm simply going to enter an email address in here, okay? As with everything in Frable, you don't have to enter an actual email address because it can be completely dynamic. The whole thing can be created dynamically. But what if you want to set up a workflow? So just to be clear, let me actually do it in one case just to be sure. So let's say I'm going from employee to manager, and the finance step is routed anonymously by email. I can go in here and I can just enter an email address, okay? And all this means is that when the manager completes the workflow, it's going to be assigned completely by email. Whatever email address is entered here, you'll get an email with a link. You click on the link and up comes the workflow. There's no authentication or no login required, okay? Now, what if I want to assign it anonymously to somebody outside my organization? And typical scenarios are client contracts, or I need to be able to send a services order to the client anonymously, but I need to be able to also, let's say the client signs it and sends something back to me. I need to be able to reject to that particular client. I need to be able to create escalations so that if the client or the anonymous person receiving the email doesn't respond in 2 hours or 2 days or whatever the appropriate amount of time is, I can create escalations to send them reminders. So what you need to do in that, a pattern that works well in that situation is in the first step in the workflow to simply ask for their email. There's no assignment at all in this. And if you look at the form here, in the verify email, there's simply an enter. All it does is ask for your email address. And the second form is where you ask for the real data, whatever you're actually trying to do in that workflow. And in the workflow, the second step is actually assigned to that particular email address. So what's this going to do? In the first step, I'm going to ask for the person's email address. Then once they type in that email address, when I click continue, since the second step is actually assigned to that email address, whatever email address I type in here, I'm going to get a link. So I will type my own email address here, and I'm going to click verify. And I will now get a link in my email to that particular workflow. So there it is. Please verify your email. I'm going to copy that link and actually make sure I log out here first. So now I'm completely anonymous. I'm not logged in at all, but when I click that link here, the next step shows up. Now, because I've set this up, I don't know, whatever. Continue, the request has gone. I wonder why I routed this though. Okay, I routed it to frevvo manager. Find somebody in that role. Oops, just a sec. I need to log in. I think Jerry has that particular role. Okay, so here's the anonymous user that I saw here. It's come to me, the user Jerry in here. Internally, now if I want to internally say, I don't like what's come over here, the amount's too low, I can just click reject over here and send it back to this particular email address. I probably in here should have gone to the first step and disabled the rejection. You can disable this. You can see when I click reject, you never want to reject it all the way back to the verify email. So you're going to always reject it to this enter data. And I could give whatever reason, amount is too low or whatever, something in here, and I click submit, and this workflow will now be rejected back to the anonymous user. So I should receive another email which says, look, it's been rejected. And I can go back, click on that link, come back over here and say, oh yeah, I forgot a zero in here. It really is $250,000. Click continue, and again, the workflow now should appear in Jerry's task list. So once again, I can go back and forth between users within the organization, outside the organization, between users, roles, and email addresses completely in a completely ad hoc manner in Frable. Now, what about actual parallel workflows? And since we don't have the fork join capability as yet, available as yet, we have in a couple of situations created, you can from workflow 1, you can start workflow 2, or from workflow A, you can kick off multiple instances of workflow B. So we have created customer forms or workflows, I should say, where the first workflow simply collects or maybe it reads from a database, or it can read, or it can have a table where the user collects, where the user types in the destinations for the second workflow, and in the second and then just kicks off multiple instances of that second workflow B. You can kick off as many instances as you want. And then Frable also has a feature called, I think it's called task for first step. Megan, correct me if I'm wrong there, but something like that. And when workflow B starts, it can automatically end up in the very first step in the task list of the particular user. If you need to do a join and continue with workflow C in this case, unfortunately at this point you have to use an external system, some sort of database or Google Sheet or something that can be used to perform the join function on, how do you know that all those 3 workflows have been completed? Obviously a workaround, not the ideal solution, but as I said, our team is very much working on providing this kind of functionality in-house as well. Okay, so going to stop right now, pause right there. I think we've walked through a number of patterns over here, trying to show you how you can route workflows between users, between roles, not route them at all, do all of this stuff completely dynamically, as well as route workflows anonymously, completely outside your organization. So I'll pause here. Megan, I don't know if there are any questions that I can answer.
We do have some questions, and anybody else can feel free to type your questions into the chat panel. The first question is, do you have templates of these different workflows?
Do you have templates for these workflows? Well, yes, we have. I mean, certainly all of these I can share. I can share the workflows that I've created here with you. If you want, just send our support team an email. And then many of these examples of this kind of routing does exist in several templates that are already in Frable. And if we don't have a specific template, it's pretty simple for us to create one and provide that to you. So just contact us if you have any specific routing type of template that you're looking for, and we'll be more than happy to point you to it.
Great. Here's another question. Let's say I have a workflow that requires that whoever initiates the form cannot sign on the approval step. Is that something that we can, that Fravo can do?
So I start the form and I cannot. Yeah, I mean, yes, you can. I mean, I'm assuming the question is being asked because the second step is being routed to a role, and I have that role, and so it might show up in my inbox. You can certainly prevent me in the validation in the workflow itself if I accidentally pull up my own PO or whatever it is to approve. You can certainly basically in the form prevent me from signing or approving, or show an error saying, sorry, you're not authorized to approve your own PO or your own vacation. So the short answer is yes, you can accommodate that for sure. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on how to do that, Megan. I mean, you created quite a few yourself, but that seems
yeah. And I think that our CS team has created a very similar pattern where there's either a restriction on the approval step that kind of validates that the user is not whoever started the workflow.
Right.
So that can definitely be accommodated.
Okay.
And then is it possible to, oh, hold on. Sorry, let me just read this. Is integration restricted to databases? Can we interface with a platform via an API? And how extensive is integration?
No, integration is not at all restricted to databases. So we have a variety of backend systems that you can integrate with: databases, Google Sheets, Google Drive, various document management systems, SharePoint, and a few other systems. But we certainly also have the ability for you to call out to a web service via an API, some sort of RESTful web service. We have extensive support for that, so I'm not sure how to answer how extensive is the integration. You can really literally call out to any web service that you want, and provide data in the form, and wait for a response. And again, and there are also, I suppose there are also multiple ways to do that within, for example, within business rules. Also, we have there's also an HTTP wait notify capability within the product itself. Okay, I hope I answered the question.
Super.
But
all right, I think that's all we've got, Ashish.
All right, well, fantastic. Well, thank you very much for attending. Hopefully you found the webinar interesting and informative. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. You can find a link to that on our website at frevvo.com. There's a contact link up here, or of course you can feel free to email your account manager or whoever you're working with. Take care. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.